Hello everyone, welcome back. Well, we've had a few new things, developments have happened. Our collaborator in Australia, Lisa, has been named as the keynote speaker to a conference we're having here in October, November, the Teaching and Learning Conference. So Lisa will be coming over here next semester, so those of you who are around, there'll be things we'll be doing with her. I don't know what exactly. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to be talking to other professors about this particular course and what we did on this course. So I may well get some of you involved in that. Okay? So, the group of us who are going over to Australia, they've been watching Australian movies, and I've ruined lots of films for you forever, haven't I? They all had to watch Hugo Weaving in a dress last night. So, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. So, ruined The Matrix forever.
More interesting.
Made The Matrix more interesting, yes. That's right. So what we're planning to do, we'll talk with the Australian students. Lisa asked us to come online at 7:40, so we've got 40 minutes. She's going to join us then. What we're going to do today, Patrick and I talked about what we were going to do with you guys and the Australian students and how we're going to work it. Lisa's class is quite small, there's about 7 students, and we have 7 groups. So it seems like a natural thing to put one of their students with each of our groups. And what we decided we are going to do, we will talk about this today and we'll hand out an assignment. On Thursday we'll formalise the assignment of what we're going to do. Is each of your groups is going to act as researchers for the Australian student. So you're going to work to, whatever they're working on, for example, the one we started talking to, there was one student who was writing about the singularity, and he's writing kind of fiction around the singularity. So the group who wrote about the singularity will provide, your job is to find resources, act like librarians and find resources for the students in Australia. So we'll formalise that today. What we want to do today when we're talking to the Australians is find out a little bit more about what each of those students are doing and match up the individual groups. So some of your groups can talk about what each group did, and we can match you up with the Australian students, okay? Yes? Good. All right, what we're going to do for the first part of today is we're going to watch a little film and then talk about it, as usual. And it's quite comedic. It's a discussion of Futurama and how Futurama actually proves to us that transhumanism isn't going to work. But what's really interesting about this clip is it really hits exactly on all of the things we've been talking about in class. Particularly some of the ideas. One of the ideas that cropped up, which is a fundamental thing as it appears here, is the idea of human goals, achievement, happiness, and this kind of way we balance our own happiness, and whether transhumanism and the ideals of transhumanism will change that. So we'll have a talk about this, but let's watch this little clip first. Hopefully this will work. So it's our friend again, who we saw talking before.
Here's an idea. The greatest argument against transhumanism might be Futurama. After a certain point, nobody likes getting older. You get tired.
Actually, before we start, I haven't explained what I've handed out here. So, what I've handed out is a sheet with some of the key ideas that are in this talk. And this is for you to make your own notes, try and relate these together. And he talks very fast about very difficult concepts, so it will allow you to put them together, link some of these, make notes so that you can talk about them afterwards, okay? Okay, let's start.
Here's an idea. The greatest argument against transhumanism might be Futurama. After a certain point, nobody likes getting older. You get tired, you start to lose your hair, you get forgetful, and the chances you will have no idea how to use the printer increase dramatically. Not the least of the folks fed up with the aging process are the Trans-Humanists, a group of scientists, philosophers, and theorists who are working towards a point where technology will free us from all biological constraints. That's right, all. Coined by French philosopher Pierre Teilhard de Chardin in his 1949 book, The Future of Mankind, and forwarded by some notoriously smart folks like Ray Kurzweil, Nick Bostrom, and Max Moore, the goals of transhumanists are not insignificant. Use technology to stop aging, erase all mental and physical disabilities, and reach true social and political equality. On the human-by-human level, maybe that looks something like the Bionic Commando, or Samus Aran, or the $6 Million Man, or Data, or like something we've never imagined before. The ultimate goal being to help us reach our next evolutionary stage, like a cloud of gas or a face in a jar. Technology, the transhumanists say, will help us reach this point, a point where we are so fundamentally different that 100% of humanity's involuntary suffering will be eliminated. This belief is called abolitionism, and it's the exact opposite of the Kurt Vonnegut short story Harrison Bergeron, basically. It sounds pretty pie in the sky, right? I mean, in David Pearce's abolitionist manifesto called The Hedonistic Imperative, he even says things like, over the next 1,000 years or so, the biological substrates of suffering will be eradicated completely. Malaise will be replaced by the biochemistry of bliss. This is a prediction which, though it occurs around the same time as, is essentially the opposite of Futurama. Well, sort of the opposite. I mean, Futurama's portrayal of the year 3000 does have all kinds of crazy, life-altering technological advancements. Space travel, sentient robots, transportation tubes, dark matter engines, Farnsworth's alternate universe box, not to mention a united world government, united under Robot Nixon, but still, interstellar diplomacy, plenty of biological advancements, and near immortality. As long as you don't mind being a head in a jar. But regardless of the fact that you can get all roboted up or smell distant odors, Futurama's world seems pretty far away from Pearce's pre-programmed euphoria. Seriously though, New York has cloning, near-infinite sources of clean energy, infinite and renewable sources of food, and one globally united nation. Yet social issues abound, as do political and economic complexities, personal struggles, and in general, unless you've been brain slugged, everything's great, everyone should get a brain slug. There's plenty of stuff to be upset about. Futurama's brand of transhumanity looks pretty different from the kind they advertise on the side of the box. Though able to defeat aging and remedy suffering, it is far from an evil. Futurama isn't the post-scarcity, post-war Earth of Star Trek. It's not even Thomas More's complex but fair Utopia or Matt Faction's Cold Heart Island. It's just sort of like today, but later. You could say that Futurama embraces a human characteristic that the transhumanists think they can erase or reverse. It's something called the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill explains the fact that whatever positive or negative impacts occur, people's happiness levels will always equalize. Like, think about all of the positive impacts technology has had on everyday life. Many diseases have been eradicated, tons of simple tasks are 1,000 times easier. You have a whole universe of information right at your fingertips. But are we on the whole any happier than we were in 1950? I mean, for all of the awesome and positive stuff that happened, why aren't we all just constantly enthralled? Though life might be easier, we are not necessarily happier.
I made myself sad.
Like, let's say someone stole your bike, and you want to punch the universe. But after not long, your fundamental happiness level is about the same it always is. That is the hedonic treadmill hard at work. It's sort of like a mood thermostat, making sure that you're always at a cool, comfortable, yeah, pretty okay, I guess. It explains how fry can be frozen for 1,000 years and basically be fine within a day or two. And how, as Louis C.K. might put it, everything is amazing and nobody is happy.
You're sitting in a chair in the sky.
In order for everything to be amazing and for everyone to be happy all of the time, which you could argue is the transhumagoal numero transhumo, the hedonic treadmill would have to be disabled or stabilized or something, which maybe that would be amazing, but which through a kind of weird and forced emotional socialism might just turn us into the neutral planet.
I have no strong feelings one way or the other.
Like, in the imagined future societies of Krypton, the Jetsons, and Futurama, everything is amazing, but amazing is also sometimes inconvenient, or bad, or fraught, or polarizing, or just normal. Those complications, yes, are the sources of pain, suffering, malaise, and boredom, but are also from where we derive goals, satisfaction, and ambition. The ups and downs and peaks and plateaus of the hedonic treadmill are part of human nature. They are sources of inspiration and go-for-itness. You're right, though. This is all a little future apples and space oranges. An academically supported, expertly backed theory about human evolution compared to a science fiction television show with a frog that can hypnotize you. But in a way, both present a possible future. Both have their points, and both in some way resemble today. We already sort of are transhuman. I mean, we have pacemakers, cochlear implants, and pneumatic limbs, so we're not saying that's not going to happen. But are happiness levels increasing with inverse proportionality to the number of transistors you can fit in a square inch? Seems like no. Surrounded by all of this life-changing and extending technology, we still fight with our friends, get mad at our bosses, suffer from inferiority complexes, and try, though not always succeed at being better versions of ourselves. And my gut tells me, maybe that's okay. What do you guys think? Which future is more likely? One that resembles Futurama, or one that looks like transhumanism? Let us know.
Enough information in that? Jammed in? But do you agree with me that that seems to cover a lot of the things we talked about in class? Hit on some of the points? Tom?
Yeah, I think that what I got out of that early on was I don't really think we talked a whole lot about, the idea of, eliminating mental disability or disorder or whatever, because, and I feel a little, I think that's a little scary sounding, because to a degree at some point, given the amount of important leaders and innovators that have had some sort of mental illness at some point, it's almost like you're doing more claiming to do something like that, if it succeeds, might do more damage than...
Well, it's not just eliminating mental illness. They were talking about this idea of emotional neutralization of some sort. And I do like this phrase. I've never heard this phrase before. Have you heard of the hedonic treadmill, Patrick?
I was wondering when I was on all these shares. No, actually, we had a conversation many weeks ago when we were talking about happiness.
I know that's why this came up, but it's in these terms. I've not heard
phrase before.
No, I've not heard this phrase before.
But I think I would prefer the hedonistic imperative to the hedonic treadmill.
Hedonism. You prefer some biochemistry of bliss?
Yes. You can never get enough bliss.
Aaron?
So I remember when what Patrick was talking about when we were talking about the hedonic treadmill, and what I said then, and what he kind of touched on it for like 2 seconds, I caught him say it, saying that our propensity to kind of normalize and equalize is important for our future planning. Whereas if we're always content with what we have now, we're never going to have that kind of future thinking ahead and doing things that are going to further advance us and further our cause.
The way he puts it is that the hedonic treadmill, the ups and downs, are what creating us goals and satisfaction, is the way he puts it in this. And that was something that was repeatedly said in the class. People came up with this idea. Yeah. Do you remember people talking about this idea of that without, it's not just happiness, but without this kind of emotional movement, humans cannot create goals and satisfaction. And there was some sort of
humans are
an achievement, yeah.
But at least as humans are currently thought of as being. In other words, it seems to me that there's a little bit of a tautology here, where he's positing this thing about this idea about sort of reaching an equilibrium as happiness, and that somehow that has to persist. If I understood his suggestion, it seems like he's saying that sense of equilibrium has to persist. But it seems to me that's actually the debate. Does that actually have to persist? And I think it's an open question.
Well, what he seems to be saying to me is the kind of science fiction Futurama still has this human condition.
Right, right.
Whereas many of the people like Kurzweil and the singularity theory on the, what I would call the hard transhumanists, like we call the hard AI, are discussing the removal of that.
Yeah, I think I agree.
So, I think I don't know everything about it, but at the kind of biological level, the hedonic treadmill comes down to a downregulation in dopamine receptors in your brain. It's basically the same way you get like addicted to cocaine and you need more and more to get to the same point of the same bliss. It's because the dopamine receptors in those areas of your brain actually atrophy and get taken away in order for your brain to maintain homeostasis. So from a, the hard transhumanism, like you're saying, they could actually remove that that upregulation that happens in the brain, and then you would never upregulate. So the same amount of cocaine would always get you the same high, or the same driving the same cool sports car always feels the same and always feels really cool, and always like,
And
you'll never get used to it.
the video we watched last week with the idea of just putting the little probe in, switching the electricity on and making you happy. It's this idea of will that remove this, the hedonic treadmill, this idea of what makes us motivated for goals and ambition. I don't know. I don't know if we have an answer to that. On top.
I'd argue that as much as I don't like being unhappy, but I guess I don't think anybody else does either. But I feel that, by doing something like trying to eliminate the hedonic treadmill and trying to get rid of happiness, is bad. That I think that part of being human is feeling pain, suffering, depressed, whether it's feeling lonely or whether it is dealing with some sort of physical problem. I'd say part of the human experience that's an integral part of it is this feeling pain.
Well, that's one of the sides of this argument, that it's a part of being human. The transhumanism argument is, why do we have to have the human? Why do we still have to keep that? And we appreciate that that's something we have now, but do we have to keep that? And this is, I thought he made the point rather well, that we could go either way with this technology in the future.
Or some third or fourth way.
Or some third or fourth way. We don't know what's going to happen. And as he said, this technology already exists. No one's arguing that we're not going to have these implants. But are we going to remain on this kind of treadmill the way humans have these emotional lives? Or are we going to start putting the things in our brain to make us happy?
The point that he doesn't say about hedonic treadmill, I can't say that word, is I think we influence it anyway. Even if there's no chip to make it happy, it makes sense that humans have a baseline they go back to. You get really mad about something, you go back, or you get really happy, you go back. But don't we throughout our lives adjust that set point? So where I'm at this level, well, I get a job, using more money, or I meet this girl, different things happen in my baseline on the treadmill goes up here. And this more happy level is what I go back to. Or it can get worse and I have more depressed level.
So you're saying that the actual medium level moves,
yeah, I think a lot of choices affect whatever the baseline treadmill is.
So let's put this, you can have a bad year.
Yeah.
And a good year. So it's not something that's a stable, but the actual level shifts as well.
I don't have any. I don't have any evidence to prove that, but it makes sense to me in my head that we'd shift the baseline throughout our lives.
Yeah, I agree with that. Right. Yes.
I'm not part of this class, but I don't say. But the treadmill itself, it will continue to be part of humanistic feelings, because as you progress in happiness, of course it will neutralize, because that happiness now becomes part of your everyday life. Sure, you get a job and it goes up, but once it stabilizes at that point, your happiness no longer drops forward. It stabilizes, it's now neutral.
imagine a circumstance where people are deprived of everything, and tortured and deprived of food, things like that. So just think about the death camps in the Nazi era. And happiness, if you listen to the testimony of people like Viktor Frankl and those writers, it's not really happiness that allowed them to survive. It was finding meaning in something, even if it was just persistent. So another thing to factor in here would be, maybe we can live without any real access to happiness in great circumstances of deprivation. But if we find in those circumstances something that human beings generally call meaning, apparently that was a key factor in leading to survivors.
Which has been a key discussion of all our discussion of artificial intelligence and transhumanism has revolved around that concept. So
it has. I'll just throw that out there as a kind of an alternative to just zeroing in. Maybe happiness has to somehow be tied to some other larger context. The other quick idea here, he's very fast talking and very young, but and very slow and old. And one of the things that I'm beginning to be a little bit more alert to is that the activities and the challenges that we face in our younger days are not the same. We face different kinds of tasks or challenges as we get older.
Different goals, different motivations.
Yeah, and so what I wonder is, in a transhumanism, in a vision for transhumanism, can we factor in something like, if we don't want to call it aging, can we factor in something that we might call maturity? A lot of times what the mystical traditions and the religious traditions of the world tend to say about old age is that it's a time to let go. It's a time, when you're young, the task that young people have is to make something of themselves in the world, to kind of secure a place for themselves, make a contribution, secure a quality of life for the people that depend upon them. But then we get all that done, more or less, and then it's time for other things to happen. The question becomes, if we change our, if transhumanism allows us to change our relationship to aging, do we still, in that manufacturing of a transhumanist age, want to continue to keep something like that, those different stages of life in play? So I'll just offer it as an open question.
But this also ties into the idea of the sense of self as a constantly changing and evolving thing. We had that discussion that you are you at this point and you're not the same as you in 10 minutes' time. So this, whether it's a transhuman or a human, we have that constantly changing sense of self. That is still going to exist.
Yeah, I like that. I guess in part I'm saying, do you want your first half of life to be the whole of all of your life, especially if it's extended for hundreds of years, if the transhumanism project is successful. So
that reminds me of two things. One thing that Joseph Campbell said in his Power of Myth interviews with Bill Moyers. I think I remember him basically saying, it was like a year or two before he died, that at that age, he was in his 80s, and at that point, he was spending more and more time. He said, in ancient traditions, getting old was like, as you got older, again, it was sort of like you were respected more and more. It was, you were wiser, you were smarter, like almost to a degree, getting old was respected. It wasn't like, oh, it wasn't considered taboo or whatever. And he took that as being, like what you were saying of, this is sort of where you pass down your knowledge, you set everything up, and you sort of enjoy the time you have left and, reflect on everything. And, that, and, I remember what Steve Jobs said in his Stanford speech for graduation. He said something about how death is the single best invention. He said that death is the single best invention out there because it's all about getting rid of the old and bringing in the new. And so I guess to that degree, like I'd make the argument of, yeah, by eliminating death, by getting rid of all of that, I think you do. You first of all, I think you do hinder the further advancement of humanity, because again, it's like Job said, out the old and the new. If the people on top aren't dying and allowing new ideas to come forward, we're not advancing anywhere. I'd say it would be the sort of end of, without death, I don't think there is any sort of meaning in life.
Well, that's the classic way to frame the debate, but I don't know if it has to be the case. I don't want to conflate a claim that Steve Jobs would have made with Joseph Cannon. I think that they were radically different kinds of people. So the question that I'm posing isn't like, let's hold on to the certainties that we know about, but let's think about exploring the possibility that aging might be redefined in the transhumanist age, in a transhumanist time. And then the question would be, well, what would we like aging to be? Do you always want to have to struggle to create something new, to bring in the new, to come up with yet another invention, to have yet another smart idea? Or do you imagine that the quality of our human lives might be one where we say, I've done that, I want to do something else?
Great.
I would like to share what my father has shared with me. He's a 65-year-old man, and he has to work. He has to work. Whereas the generation before him could have retired and reflected on, his life or whatever, like he has to work to be able to pay the bills. And so, like, I think in a transhumanist world where death is put off into the far future, I think there's going to be just more of a struggle to pay the bills, you know what I mean? Because that's what we have to do. Like, there's Social Security right now, but there are questions of whether or not Social Security will be viable. And my father is certainly thinking about that and thinking like, no, absolutely it's not going to take care of him and my mother and whatever else they need to do. So like Joseph Campbell, I would love to live in that world as an 80-year-old person, saying, okay, this is what I've done with my life, I'm reflecting on it, it's wonderful, whatever, maybe my body is decaying in all kinds of ways.
It's for the record, he had noted, I believe, that yeah, death scared the hell out of him, but it was the notion of these myths and everything that have that sort of help him come to terms with it.
Yeah, and so my dad right now is focused more on like maintaining his health, his bodily health, so that he can make the money that he needs to make to provide for his family as a 65-year-old.
What kind of work does he do? Is it very heavy labor, or is it?
No, it's like business management and stuff. And so, but still, like older guys are getting pushed out in favor of the younger guys, because that's just kind of the societal thing that we have. Is like, okay, old guys have old ideas, and we need new guys to bring in new ideas. So I think there's a real fear engendered in this transhumanist idea. If we prolong life to this degree, that there's not going to be enough resources to maintain these sort of lives.
You make an excellent point that we probably haven't talked about very much, and it is that economies and the nature of the economy would have to change. And I think we're probably way behind the curve on this already as a society. We shouldn't have to be working as hard as we are. Right? Why, with all of the technological advances that we currently have, why isn't the work week down to 20 hours? Right? Why don't we make more money from working less?
Why don't people retire earlier? Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
So if you're interested in this idea, there was a philosopher who was in the Flint, Michigan area, I think Fritzoff Bergman, and he wanted to argue that labor unions and groups like that should actually be pushing for a kind of way of understanding working life, where we actually make available to automobile workers or whoever it might be, something like university faculty have, that they should have sabbaticals. Everyone who works should have a sabbatical, a paid-for sabbatical. And then let's say we take a 40-hour week as a measure. Well, then he would argue that maybe 20 of those hours could be where that laborer is getting paid, is drawing on a salary of some kind, to perhaps work in grade schools or the high schools or building playgrounds. He thought that we could divide our labor time in half. And everyone who's a worker, everyone who's a laborer. So you could divide the year in half. He was talking about Caterpillar workers at one point. He said, why don't we have an arrangement where everybody works for Caterpillar, or the people who want to chime in on this, they could work 6 months for Caterpillar, and then they could go to Africa for 6 months and build roads or whatever kinds of infrastructure would be useful and would be, environmentally wise decisions. So why aren't we radically rethinking the very nature of work itself? Instead, what we've seen in the last crisis, the last economic downturn, is that we refuse to rethink these economic models about the very nature of work. But when I was a kid, back in the 50s, we'd go to the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, and they talked about the 21st century. It's going to be this century of leisure. Everything will be nuclear powered. We'll have all this time on our hands to do great things. So.
That's just reminded me, I'm going to talk really cheesy now. I've started watching the show Battlestar Galactica. And I'm watching the recent one. And there's an episode of that on politics, and there was a really good speech just the other night. I saw and there's people arguing for political power on these ships, and one of them says, we are still living as we did on Earth, on the planet. People are struggling, people have, and there's a guy who's tending a lawn, a gardener. He said, look at this guy, he's a gardener, why is he gardening? What are we doing here? People are still trying to make money, and money's useless, and we have a completely different society. We have to rip it all apart and start again because things have changed. And I remember thinking at the time about this class, and thinking about it just reminded me then, but I remember thinking of transhumanism and with the changing technology. Are we going to have to just change society totally? Anyway, I'm talking, your hand's been up for ages, I'm really sorry. Go on.
There's a quote from Buckminster Fuller that I'm totally going to mess up here, but it's something along like the technology already exists where most people could live a life of leisure, and instead everybody works because we're still holding on to enlightenment ideals of having to justify.
That's exactly the same point, yeah.
But I wanted to go back to earlier points about this video. And you said, Professor, that it was something of a tautology. I don't really agree with that because the hedonic treadmill is really the only thing we've ever known, or could know for now. And I think it's more than just happiness, like, forgive me, but in Star Trek, everybody has all their needs met. They're replicators, so nobody starves, nobody does anything. And they also have holodecks, so they could just sit around like pretending to have orgasms 24 hours a day. People still join Starfleet because I want to be happy. They could stay home on Earth and be content, but they want to do more. Like you said, they want to have some kind of meaning. And also you think of in Caltech 2.2, when C works at like the museum and then the college personnel office, she's perfectly content when she's happy and her needs are met, but she just wants something more. And I think it's totally possible to remove pain and sadness and suffering and still be able to want to move forward. It's a common argument when people say if Van Gogh took antidepressants, he wouldn't have been a painter at all. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily true, because we could say if he would paint even more if he didn't have to worry about being sad or anything.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I've got a lot to say, but I don't know what people.
Well, we're going to have to switch on in about 5 minutes. 5 minutes, so.
Let's, why don't you guys stop?
Yeah.
I was going to say exactly what you just said. One of the things I think of is contour grafting with 3D printing. It would like almost cut labor in half in terms of building buildings and stuff. And a lot of contractors and architects are very afraid of it because They're afraid that it'll change their workforce or remove jobs or whatever. And I think that's an example of that. Jobs for humans is so important to us in terms of like self-efficacy and providing a living that I don't think we're not ready to give that up just yet. You know, like although like robots are willing and able to become our like supplements to us or replace us eventually, I'm not sure if we would even really like that, because even like you see people who retire, they come back to the workforce later when they realize that they don't like doing nothing. You know, so I think that that's really something that could also contribute to our happiness.
I'd just like a little bit more free time.
The alternative is not between doing something work and doing nothing leisure. The alternative, and this was Bergman's larger argument, the alternative is to create opportunities for people who aren't working in the traditional sense of it, so that they can make the best use of their leisure time. The Marxists have a wonderful phrase, they call it alienated or estranged labor. So inside of capitalism, as a mode of production, labor is alienated. And when you produce alienated labor, then you have this leisure, which is just another, it's sort of the flip side of alienated labor. But what we need to do is reinvent an economy where you do the kind of Star Trek thing. Let's go see what's over the other side of the next hill. You know, let's just go out and look around and see what's out there. And there are lots of ways to do that. But we see the failure of education, Merlin would argue, because people don't know what to do. If we created an economy where there wasn't alienated labor, people would still have this question, what do I do with my time? And that's what we need to be addressing. Yeah, sorry, I'll stop. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Okay. Well, I mean, as far as like I think the work week, I don't think we can really expect the work to shorten ever, because I think that I feel like we'll naturally work out to our like as much as we can. Like the more other technology advances, we'll be able to produce more things. You know, we'll still. It's not like we're going to work less because we have less, our needs are more easily met. But we'll just expand faster, our economy will expand faster. So we'll be working at the same rate, producing more.
That's the capitalist problem. Yeah.
Right. Well, I guess that's.
The question is it sustainable, right? When you have this massive amount of overproduction, you really can't use. It puts the land to waste, all of that.
I think with what we're talking about changing the way the system works, re-engineering the economy or how labor works or that sort of thing. I think it's difficult to change things because it's difficult to modify a system that's in place and then have it work as you're changing it. And the only reason that we have, the economy, kind of this idea of how things work as they are now is because they started very small and they, snowball effect. That's what we want. And I think as far as sustaining people in the future, as far as immortality, to sustain everybody indefinitely, efficiency really becomes the question. And I think we're starting to grasp that with very kind of eco-mindedness and sustainability and that sort of thing, but it's not perfect until we get there.
You are currently the only person in this conference.
I'm sorry. With just the difficulties of changing the system and capitalism and Marxism and everyone working 40-hour weeks, all of these ideas, and I don't know enough about anthropology to know when it really happened, but all these ideas are relatively, for the majority of human history, we barely worked at all. I mean, tribal societies.
And then with the Industrial Revolution, we worked all the time, and later humans had to fight for something called a weekend. And there's this wonderful line in Downton Abbey, a weekend, what's that?
Yeah. So I guess to me, combining those kind of ideas of living tribally and transhumanism, I can imagine a world where we would work a lot less.
Yeah. And be paid more for the work that we do.
Because we've done it before. We lived in a world where we worked a lot less and we're able to take care of everyone.
I think it's kind of like counter to what everyone else is saying, but I know a lot of, it's kind of opposite what you were saying about your father, but a lot of people, they're living longer. Being 65 today is not the same as being 65 when like your father was 65. And so people are retiring at the same age still, but they're much healthier and they're living much longer, and they're living out these fantastic retirements.
where they get to take their boat out or take an RV across the country, and they kind of are living out these, I mean, somebody who's 65 today, when their father was 65, he retired at 65 because he had 5 years to not work while he was dying, you know, and now this guy's 65 and he gets to live to be 100, just like cruising around, living life, living off Social Security and all the money that he made his whole life.
There was some amazing statistic about increasing age. Something.
Social Security.
Yeah, and with something like anyone under, you know, something like 80% of people under 20 years old will live to be over 100, something like this. So you keep seeing these incredible statistics, you know, which, you know,
in some ways they're wonderful, in other ways they're a little frightening.
Yeah, it's Hans Rosling, if you've not seen it. I know those of you who've done my data visualization class have seen the Hans Rosling increasing longevity videos, tech talks. Anyway.
I'll bring this discussion back to the economic facet of the argument. Economics right now and the way that it's structured is unchangeable because we talk fundamentally human. And even if transhumanism did progress, those people would still be human. We'd be driven by greed, by want, desire. What fundamentally makes us human. So it would be impossible to change an entire economic standard in order to incorporate all of that into society.
This is one reason why Marx talks a lot about class warfare. The UFO community, there's a guy who talks about UFOs quite a bit, and he is Richard Dolan. He invented, I think, or is borrowing a phrase from someone called breakaway society. I think it's an interesting concept that certain members of, we may be getting to that point in our economic history where certain privileged people will have access to certain kinds of technology and they'll leave others behind. And so we do have this problem. The historical models up to this point tend to suggest that when we get large disparities between different groups of people, there's something like bloody revolutions, beheadings, guillotines, and all those kinds of things. So if the wealthy study their own history, unless they somehow guarantee themselves the capacity to separate themselves completely from this world as we know it, if the wealthy study their own history, which they don't seem to be doing these days, they would be very alert to bloody revolutions.
So what I was going to say is, you say, you know, it's human nature to want to have greed and such. It's also human nature to have coherent revolutions, put people's heads on pikes and just kill. So the people on top will eventually die through one cause or the other, and the people who follow their footsteps may or may not choose to follow their footsteps.
And the trick here is, of course, that if you're taking our kind of loosely Marxist analysis, that new economies emerge out of the collapsing of older economies. So a lot of people who think about these kinds of problems will basically argue that we're currently living in a late stage of multinational capitalism, but that it will come crashing down in its own weight.
But the problem here is, like, currently living in the United States of America, that kind of revolution and that kind of stir of people to bring down the 1%, it's not fundamentally possible.
It may not be right now, but
like everything would have to come crashing down.
And I don't think anybody wants it to.
Exactly, because our government is structured around us.
We all have too much to lose. It's when people don't have anything more to lose that you see these kinds of developments. But as long as there's a possibility that people will be able to reach a certain measure of comfort in their lives, then they're not very likely to engage in extreme political violence. A lot of you want to talk, so I don't know how about this. We're going to have to go over to Australia soon.
They've not switched on yet. We're still waiting. Well, Lisa's in, but her sound isn't on and her camera's not on. So when she switches on, I'll tell you. Just carry on. As soon as she comes on, I'll tell you.
Where were we in somebody who hasn't spoken yet? Who wants to speak next? Okay,
John.
If I could bring it back around a little, like transhumanism thing. I'm not sure it's really fair to talk to judge our future by what we consider to be human nature. Because I think we're calling all that into question with the discussion now. So.
Right, the question is, if we look at what we've got, you know, based on the general historical sense of what's happened in the past, but again, your point's well taken. There's a fundamental change in the material conditions that we're in new territory. Right. We won't be able to engage in the same kinds of predictions. Are we here?
We have economics of the future will be about water and fresh vegetables, says Lisa.
Yeah. It will be about food and water.
Spoken like somebody in the country where Mad Max takes place.
She hasn't mentioned gasoline though. Petrol.
Well, we've no camera from Lisa at the moment, so.
Are they looped in with the mic?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
You carry on.
She just wrote, David, no. Can you hear us?
No, we can't hear them.
Can we see her?
Let me try.
There's video.
Oh, there's video. Hello. We can see you. We can, Lisa, we can see you. Can you hear us? Let me try this. Is this going to be a bit bigger? Hi, Lisa. We can see you. Can you hear us? No sound. No sound. We'll try the audio again.
Can they hear us?
Can you hear us? Oh. Oh, that sounds very quiet, but we can. Yay!
Yeah, we've got it.
We got it. Can you hear us?
Now why can't we hear them?
Oh, we can hear you.
She says they can't hear us.
They can hear us.
Let me try again. We're on the right microphone. Can you hear us now? Can you hear us? No? Still no mic sound. Still no sound. Testing, testing. I don't know, what should you know? We've got a whole bunch of them in here. Last time it was just the microphone. Oh dear. Let's record. It's there. It's there. You can't hear us. Still can't.
Need to do is in it. No, we had it right last week. About two system preferences.
Hey.
Go to the sound.
No, we can't hear you still.
With select sound through